Ladies and gentlemen of the shadows, welcome once more to The Shadow Behind You, where the veil between the living and the lost thins to a mere whisper. I am your guide through the labyrinth of forgotten horrors, the narrator who unearths the bones of stories long buried beneath layers of time and denial. Tonight, we venture into the heart of the American Ozarks, to a place where the hills cradle secrets like a mother holds her stillborn child. The year is 1886, and the setting is Camdenton, Missouri, a nascent settlement in Camden County, where the Niangua River snakes through dense forests like a vein pulsing with unspoken dread. Here, amid the rugged bluffs and shadowed hollows, a tale unfolds that chills the marrow, the haunting saga of the Midwife sisters, Eliza and Abigail Thorne. Every child they brought into this world was doomed, cursed to wither, to wander, or to drag their families into the abyss. Imagine, if you will, the Ozarks in that fateful year. The air hangs heavy with the scent of damp earth and wild honeysuckle, masking the faint rot of decay that lingers just beneath. Camdenton, though not yet the bustling county seat it would become in the early 20th century, was a cluster of log cabins and clapboard homes, forged from the wilderness by hardy pioneers who had carved their lives from the untamed land. Camden County itself had been etched into existence in 1841, born from the fragments of Benton, Morgan, and Pulaski counties, a region steeped in the isolation of the frontier. Families toiled under the relentless sun, their days marked by the rhythm of plows cutting furrows and axes felling ancient trees. But at night, when the moon cast elongated shadows across the misty valleys, the whispers began. Tales of spirits in the woods, of curses woven into the very soil. It was into this precarious world that the Thorne sisters arrived, like specters summoned by some unseen force. Eliza the elder, with her sharp features and eyes like polished obsidian, carried an air of unyielding authority. Abigail, younger and softer in form, yet with a gaze that pierced like a thorn, followed in her shadow. They came from the east, fleeing whispers of tragedy in their wake, rumors of a family estate consumed by fire, of children lost to fever. In Camdenton, they presented themselves as skilled midwives, bearers of life in a time when childbirth was a gamble with death itself. The townsfolk, desperate for aid in their remote enclave, welcomed them. Little did they know that the sisters bore a burden heavier than their herbal satchels, a pact forged in desperation, a deal with a darkness that hungered for innocence. As the sun dips below the jagged horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and crimson, let us step closer to the fire's glow. Feel the chill creep up your spine, the way the wind seems to carry faint sobs from the tree line. This is no mere ghost story, it is a chronicle of doom, where every cry of a newborn echoed with the toll of a funeral bell. What drove these women to such shadows? Was it grief, ambition, or something far older, lurking in the Ozark mists? Lean in, dear listener, for the shadow behind you grows longer. Tonight, we unravel the threads of fate, only to find them knotted in blood. The hook that snares us is simple yet insidious. In the span of a single decade, over 24 children delivered by the Thorne sisters met untimely ends. Some withered in their cradles, their tiny bodies convulsing with unseen afflictions. Others grew to toddlerhood, only to vanish into the woods, drawn by voices only they could hear. A few survived to adolescence, but madness claimed them, raving about spectral siblings, about hands reaching from the grave. The town whispered of coincidence at first, then of curse. But by then, the doom had taken root, spreading like ivy over a tombstone. To set the stage fully, we must immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of 1886 Camdenton. The settlement huddled along the riverbanks, where fog rolled in like a shroud each dawn, obscuring the paths and turning familiar landmarks into ghostly apparitions. Homes were lit by kerosene lamps, their flickering light casting dancing shadows on walls papered with newsprint. The air was alive with the calls of whip, paw, wills, birds whose nocturnal songs were said to foretell death. Superstitions reigned supreme here, as they did across Victorian America. Mirrors covered during storms to prevent spirits from entering, clocks stopped at the moment of death to allow the soul's passage, and in matters of birth, the rituals were even more fraught. Amulets of iron nailed above cradles to ward off fairies, or little people, as the Ozark folk called them, who might steal a child and leave a changeling in its place. The Thorne sisters integrated seamlessly at first, their arrival coinciding with a wave of pregnancies among the settler wives. Eliza's hands, steady and calloused, guided life into being with herbs gathered from the forest depths, fennel for easing labor, raspberry leaf for strength. Abigail sang soft lullabies in a tongue that sounded ancient, her voice a balm against the screams of travail. But beneath this veneer of benevolence lurked the omen. The first child, little Mary Hargrove, born under a harvest moon, seemed hale and hearty. Yet within weeks, her cries turned to gasps, her skin paling to the color of moonlit marble. The doctor from Lynn Creek, summoned too late, could only shake his head. "A wasting sickness," he muttered, but the townsfolk eyed the sisters with nascent suspicion. As we delve deeper, the narrative will unfold like a shroud unwrapping a corpse. We'll trace the sisters' path from saviors to harbingers, the events that spiraled into terror. But for now, let the anticipation build, like thunder gathering over the hills. Feel the weight of history pressing down, the sense that some tales are not meant to be told, lest they awaken what slumbers. Yet here we are, daring the darkness. The shadow behind you stirs. Can you feel its breath on your neck? Stay with me, for the tale of the Midwife sisters is about to birth its horrors into the light. And so, we begin our descent into the heart of the tale, where the line between life and damnation blurs like ink in water. Picture Camdenton in the spring of 1886, the dogwoods blooming in ethereal white, their petals falling like premature shrouds upon the earth. The Niangua River murmurs secrets to the willows that dip their branches into its currents, and the air carries the faint tang of wood smoke from chimneys puffing against the chill. It was here, in this cradle of wilderness, that Eliza and Abigail Thorne alighted from a weathered stagecoach, their trunks heavy with potions and linen stained by past labors. Eliza, at 38, was a woman forged in the fires of adversity. Her hair, black as a raven's wing, was pulled into a severe bun, accentuating the angular planes of her face. Scars, faint like spiderwebs, crisscrossed her hands, remnants of thorns and trials. She spoke with a clipped precision, her voice a low rumble that commanded obedience. Abigail, 5 years her junior, possessed a deceptive fragility, golden curls framing a porcelain complexion, eyes the color of storm clouds. Yet there was a steel in her, hidden like a blade in silk. They claimed kinship to distant English nobility, but their accents bore the flat drawl of the Midwest, laced with something older, perhaps Celtic whispers from across the sea. The sisters took up residence in a dilapidated cabin on the outskirts, where the forest encroached like curious fingers. They hung dried herbs from the rafters, sage for purification, wormwood for visions, and set about advertising their services. In an era when rural medicine was scarce, midwives were the guardians of birth. The local doctor, Elias Hawthorne, a grizzled veteran of the Civil War, begrudgingly acknowledged their utility. "The womenfolk need He'd grumble over whiskey at the general store, his pipe smoke curling like ghosts. The first call came in May from the Hargrove farm. Sarah Hargrove, heavy with child, writhed in agony as contractions gripped her like a vice. The sisters arrived at dusk, their lantern casting elongated shadows across the fields. Eliza examined Sarah with practiced efficiency, her fingers probing, while Abigail prepared a tisane of chamomile and peppermint to ease the pain. The labor was long, the room thick with the metallic scent of blood and sweat. As midnight tolled from a distant church bell, though Camdenton had no church yet, only a makeshift chapel, the child emerged, a girl, Mary, with lungs that pierced the night. "She's perfect," Abigail cooed, wrapping the infant in swaddling. Sarah, exhausted but radiant, wept tears of joy. The sisters departed with payment in eggs and flour, their faces masks of satisfaction. But as they trudged homeward, a owl hooted thrice from the branches, a portent, in Ozark lore, of impending death. Weeks passed and Mary thrived at first, her cheeks rosy as apples. Then the changes began. subtle at start, a cough that rattled like dry leaves, eyes glazing over with fever. Sarah summoned the sisters, but Eliza's poultices failed. Abigail's songs, once soothing, now seemed to agitate the babe. By midsummer, Mary lay still in her cradle, her tiny form cold as clay. The funeral was a somber affair, the grave dug shallow in the loamy soil. Whispers stirred. Too soon, too strange. Undeterred, the sisters attended more births. In June, the Millers welcomed twin boys, delivered under a thunderstorm that rattled the shutters. Eliza's hands were steady amid the chaos, pulling the infants free as lightning illuminated their slick forms. Abigail whispered incantations, words that sounded like Gaelic prayers, though none could tell. The boys, Jacob and Isaac, bawled healthily, but come autumn, Jacob wandered into the woods, following pretty lights. As Isaac later babbled, search parties found nothing but a tuft of hair caught on brambles. Isaac grew withdrawn, speaking to empty corners, claiming his brother called from the shadows. By fall, the pattern emerged. The widow Jenkins bore a son, Samuel. In a labor fraught with screams that echoed across the valley, the sisters' arrival brought relief, their herbs numbing the pain. Samuel was robust, but at 3 months he began to seize, his eyes rolling back to whites. He perished in frothing agony, foam flecking his lips like cursed milk. Then came the Patterson girl, Eliza, named after her deliverer. She lived to 5, only to drown in the river, her body found with arms outstretched as if embracing an invisible spectre. The town buzzed with unease. At gatherings by the riverbank, where men fished for catfish under the stars, tales proliferated. Thorns. Old man Whittaker muttered, his pipe glowing like an ember eye. They bring life, but death follows like a hound. Women crossed themselves, invoking Victorian superstitions. No pregnant soul should gaze upon a corpse, lest the child inherit its stillness, dreams of birth foretold doom. Yet necessity bound them. The sisters' skills were unmatched, their success rate in delivery flawless, even as the aftermath curdled. Deeper suspicions brewed when Abigail was seen wandering the woods at night, gathering mushrooms under moonlight. Eliza, ever the stoic, dismissed queries with a glare that could curdle milk. But cracks appeared one eve, a neighbor overheard arguing from their cabin, words like pact and price slicing through the air. What was the source of their curse? Rumors hinted at a tragic past in Ohio years prior. The sisters had lost their own children to a plague. Desperate, they sought aid from a wandering cunning woman who taught them arts forbidden, summoning entities from the earth to grant fertility's boon. But at a cost every life they ushered demanded a toll. As winter's grip tightened, frost etching patterns on windows like skeletal fingers, the births continued. The Ellis family welcomed a daughter, her cries mingling with the howl of winds. But soon, she too faded, her skin turning translucent, veins mapping a path to oblivion. The town elders convened, shadows lengthening in the lamplight. We must watch them, they decided, unaware that the true horror was only beginning to unfurl. The atmosphere thickened, each birth a ritual laced with dread. The sisters' cabin became a locus of fear, its chimney smoke twisting like tormented souls. Children whispered of ghostly playmates, pale figures beckoning from the tree line. And through it all, Eliza and Abigail pressed on, their eyes holding secrets deeper than the Ozark caves. As the tale deepens, like roots delving into poisoned soil, the shadows in Camdenton grew bolder, encroaching upon the daylight hours. By the winter of 1886, the Thorne sisters' reputation had morphed from benevolence to omen. The Ozark winds carried their names like curses, and families hesitated before summoning them, yet birth's inexorable pull left no choice. The curse, once subtle, now manifested in brazen horrors, hauntings that blurred the veil between worlds. It began with the Hargrove farm, where Mary's ghost first appeared. Sarah, grieving in the dead of night, awoke to cradle song emanating from the empty nursery. Peering in, she beheld a translucent form rocking the vacant cradle, its tiny hands grasping air. "My baby," she gasped, but the apparition dissolved like mist, leaving only a chill that seeped into bones. Word spread, and soon others reported sightings, spectral children frolicking in meadows. their laughter turning to wails as dawn approached. Eliza and Abigail, undaunted, attended the birth of the Whittaker hare in January's bite. The labor was fierce, the room a cauldron of pain and steam from boiling water. Abigail's chants rose above the storm outside, words that twisted the air. The boy, named Ezekiel, emerged blue-lipped but revived by Eliza's slaps. Gratitude flowed, but within days, Ezekiel's eyes fixed on unseen horrors, his babble laced with pleas. "They come for me." One moonless night, he vanished from his crib, the window unlatched, tiny footprints leading to the woods. Footprints that ended abruptly, as if lifted by invisible hands. Panic rippled through Camdenton. Town meetings turned heated, fingers pointing at the sisters. Dr. Hawthorne, his skepticism cracking, examined the afflicted. No natural cause. He admitted, his voice trembling. "It's as if their souls are claimed." The sisters faced interrogation in the chapel, their faces impassive as stone. "Coincidence?" Eliza snapped, her obsidian eyes flashing. "The wilds take many." But Abigail's composure faltered, a tear tracing her cheek, whispering of regret. The revelations came in fragments, pieced from eavesdropped confessions and stolen glimpses. The pact, forged in Ohio's despair, involved an entity from the old world. A fetch, Ozark folk called it, a spirit that bartered life for life. The sisters, barren after losing their babes, invoked it in a midnight ritual. Blood spilled on crossroads, herbs burned in a circle of stones. It granted them midwifery prowess, ensuring safe deliveries, but demanded tribute. The souls of the children they birth, doled out over years like debts accruing interest. In Camdenton, the fetch followed, drawn to the fertile isolation. It manifested as whispers in the wind, luring the doomed. Jacob Miller's ghost was seen leading his brother into thickets. Samuel Jenkins appeared in dreams, foretelling siblings' fates. The town armed itself with iron and salt, Victorian wards against the uncanny. Mirrors were draped, lest spirits peer through, clocks wound backward to confuse time's march. Climax brewed in March, during a communal birth at the Patterson homestead. Multiple women labored, a rare convergence. The sisters toiled amid screams, their hands a blur. 3 children emerged, 2 girls, 1 boy. But as the last cry echoed, the room darkened, lamps guttering. Shadows coalesced into forms, ghostly children, their eyes hollow pits, reaching for the newborns. Chaos erupted, mothers shrieked. Fathers brandished pokers. Eliza confronted the apparitions, her voice booming incantations. Abigail collapsed, sobbing admissions. "We paid with our own, but it wants more." The fetch revealed itself, a swirling vortex of mist and malice, faces of lost innocence writhing within. It lunged, but Eliza thrust an iron dagger, forged in secret, into its core. A wail pierced the night, shattering windows. The entity dissipated, but not without cost. Abigail, touched by its essence, aged decades in moments, her hair whitening, skin wrinkling like parchment. The aftermath was grim. The sisters fled into the woods, pursued by a mob. Eliza's body was found days later, throat slit by her own hand, a note clutched it. "The debt is paid." Abigail vanished, whispers claiming she became one with the fetch, wandering eternally. The cursed children lingered in lore, their ghosts haunting the hollows. Camdenton rebuilt, but scars remained, births forever shadowed by fear. To fully grasp the chilling authenticity of the Midwife sisters' tale, we must peel back the layers of history and folklore that enshroud it, blending fact with the eerie whispers of the past. The Ozarks in 1886 were a tapestry of isolation, superstition, and raw survival, where midwifery was not merely a profession, but a lifeline threaded with peril and mysticism. Camden County, formed in 1841 from neighboring territories, was a frontier outpost, its inhabitants descendants of Scots, Irish settlers who brought ancient beliefs across the Atlantic. Camdenton itself, though formally platted in the 1930s following the creation of the Lake of the Ozarks, existed in embryonic form as scattered settlements along the Niangua, a river named for indigenous Osage words meaning many springs, evoking images of life bubbling from the earth, only to be tainted by human folly. Midwifery in 19th century rural America was the domain of granny women, as they were known in the Ozarks and Appalachia. These healers, often untrained in formal medicine, relied on generational knowledge herbal remedies like black cohosh for inducing labor or yarrow to staunch bleeding. In an era when physicians were scarce, Dr. Hawthorne's archetype, a war-weary man with limited tools, midwives attended up to 60% of births in rural areas, their practices a fusion of European traditions and local adaptations. African-American, granny midwives, in the South added African diasporic elements, but in the predominantly white Ozarks, the focus was on Celtic and Germanic lore. Superstitions abounded. Pregnant women avoided knots in strings, lest the umbilical cord tangle. They shunned hairs, fearing hairlips in offspring. Victorian-era beliefs amplified the dread surrounding childbirth. Mortality rates were harrowing. Up to 40% of infants died before age 5 from infections, malnutrition, or wasting diseases, like tuberculosis. Dreams portended omens. Birthing in sleep signaled death's approach. Protective talismans, iron horseshoes, red ribbons, warded off evil. Death rituals intertwined. Mirrors, covered to prevent soul's entrapment. Clocks stopped to mark the eternal pause. In folklore, fetches or doppelgangers heralded doom, echoing Irish banshees or Scottish wraiths that the settlers carried in their blood. Ozark folklore, rich and shadowy, provides the eerie backbone, documented by collectors like Vance Randolph in his 1947 Ozark Magic and Folklore. It brims with curses and ghosts. Granny women were revered yet feared, accused of witchcraft if outcomes soared. Pregnancy law warned against viewing corpses, lest the child inherit pallor. Eating twin fruits risked multiples, one doomed. Birthmarks were devil's kisses, left-handed babies, changelings. Ghosts of unbaptized infants, called Willow, the wisps, lured wanderers to doom, mirroring the spectral children in our tale. Cultural trauma underpins this. The Civil War's scars lingered, with guerrilla warfare ravaging Missouri. Families fractured, leading to heightened fears of loss. Indigenous displacements, the Osage forced westward, left spiritual voids, perhaps inviting entities. Blend in Victorian morbidity, post-mortem photography, mourning jewelry from hair of the dead. The era's high child mortality fueled tales of cursed bloodlines, like inbred clans in remote hollows, their progeny afflicted. Thus, the midwife sister's story gains unsettling verisimilitude, a mirror to real fears where folklore blurs with history, leaving us haunted by authenticity. Delving into the abyss of the midwife sister's saga, we uncover symbolic depths and psychological undercurrents that resonate with universal terrors. This tale is no mere apparition. It is a reflection of humanity's primal fears, maternal betrayal, the fragility of life, and the hubris of defying nature's decree. The sisters embody the archetype of the devouring mother, a Jungian shadow where nurture twists into destruction, echoing myths like Lilith, who stole infants in the night. Thematically, fate versus free will looms large. The pact represents a Faustian bargain, where desperation births doom. In an era of high infant mortality, the curse symbolizes grief's inescapability, children as vessels for parental sins, doomed by inheritance. This connects to cultural trauma, Victorian society's repression of female agency, where midwives wielded power in birth's domain, yet were scapegoated for failures. The Ozarks' isolation amplifies agoraphobic dread, the woods a metaphor for the unconscious, harboring repressed guilts. Psychologically, the story probes collective hysteria, hauntings manifest as projections of guilt, Eliza's stoicism masking denial, Abigail's fragility revealing cracks. The fetch symbolizes the unchecked desires consuming innocence. Universal fears of child loss evoke evolutionary anxieties, cursed births tap into Thanatos, the death drive, where life invites oblivion. Human nature's dark facets emerge, ambition's cost, the illusion of control. The town's complicity, relying on the sisters despite suspicions, mirrors societal denial of systemic ills. Thematically, it critiques patriarchal medicine's encroachment on traditional midwifery, a historical erasure laced with racism and classism. In ominous tone, this exploration leaves us pondering, does the shadow behind us stem from without or within? The tale haunts because it whispers our own potential for doom. As our journey through the mists of Camdenton concludes, The echoes of doomed cries linger, a chilling symphony that defies silence. The Midwife sisters, Eliza and Abigail Thorne, stand as eternal sentinels of horror, bearers of life who sowed seeds of death, their pact a testament to desperation's price. In 1886, shadowed Ozarks, they wove a curse that claimed innocence, their ghosts perhaps still wandering the hollows, beckoning the unwary. Yet, the true haunt is the question, does the doom persist? In modern Camdenton, amid the lake's glassy calm, whispers endure, of cries on foggy nights, of children vanishing near the woods. Is the fetch sated or does it hunger anew? Dear listener, as the shadows lengthen, heed the chill on your neck. The tale warns some debts transcend the grave, and the shadow behind you may be your own.